Hey guys, and welcome to Roadmap MBA YouTube channel. I am Izzy and I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit today about red flags in the workplace. So, just so you have an idea of how today's presentation is going to go, I'm just going to have 5 different red flags of things in the workplace that you should definitely look out for, things that you should not ignore, and you know when you get that gut feeling in your stomach that something's wrong, these red flags are definitely something that will be wrong and that you should definitely bring up to either HR, or look at different possibilities about that. This video is really for people who either aren't sure, like if they're beginning their career, they aren't sure what's a red flag and what isn't, or, what's appropriate and what's not. And these red flags are definitely things that are not appropriate in the workplace. I'll be sharing 5 of them with you today. And I think that these 5 are like basically kind of just the most important ones. Of course, there's other things that you should look out for, and I'm not saying that everything else is okay, but these main ones I will beg you not to ignore, and I wish that somebody had given me the same advice. So, whether you're new in your career or you've just swapped jobs and you've started somewhere else and you've always had really like lovely and like positive environments and something's just not sitting right, or you're getting that gut feeling that something's wrong, this is for you today. I think that especially when you start out, we're most vulnerable to these things because we don't know what's acceptable and what's not. But yeah, I will be talking to you about it today. I think, first of all, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Izzy and I'm currently a manager, a media manager, and I have worked at, I want to say like 4 or 5 different big companies, all usually within like the media space and like publishing. I started off at publishing, and yeah, I think you could tell from my accent, I am not English, not UK, not a British person. I was gonna say I'm not UK based, but that's a lie, I am UK based. I'm just not British. I'd call my accent international because I went to a British / international school from the age of 4. I grew up in Portugal, but I was actually born in Brazil, so I'm a little bit of like a mutt. I'm a little bit of like everything. Born in Brazil and then moved to Portugal at the age of 4. As you can see from this little painting that I have that I hang, it's just a beach in Brazil. It's a really pretty one in Guarujá. Yeah, just thought I'd share that with you because it's pretty and you don't need to look at my face all the time. So you can look at that, it's a pretty picture. So I have that here on my desk. So I'm Brazilian Portuguese and I grew up in Portugal for most of my life. I moved to the UK at the age of 18 to study, to go to university. I actually moved to study theater, and believe it or not, I ended up studying politics. So a very big change. As you'll see, and I'll discuss this later about myself as well, I think I'm someone that just wants to experience as much of life as I possibly can. I think it's a good thing. And so if I feel that something's not working for me anymore in terms of a career or whatever it is, I will make a change and leap onto something else, which I think is really important for everyone to also do. If you think that something's not working for you, make that change. But yes, so Brazilian Portuguese, grew up in Portugal, then moved to the UK to do uni. I think that's the most basic introduction about myself. I think that something that I really enjoyed doing while I was growing up in Portugal was volunteering. And I think that if you're looking for experiences, whatever those may be before your career, whether it's like an internship or traveling the world, I would definitely urge everyone to try volunteering. It's amazing to give back, and there's so many great organizations out there that you can, pick the one that's best suited for you, whether you're more interested in climate change or perhaps volunteering at animal shelters. There is so much for you to do and so much for you to offer. And yeah, volunteering was an amazing experience. I've done volunteering with kids, vulnerable children, to mothers or like young mothers in shelters, teaching them English, to actually volunteering for like climate change places, so kind of planting trees and bringing awareness to climate change, so just like a wide range of things, which again is very much on brand with me. I just love to try different things and find what works for me. I think, yeah, life's too short, right? So yes, I moved to the UK at the age of 18, very young. Was a little baby. I think anyone who's 18 is quite young. But that might be because I'm 27, and then I think in 10 years I'm going to be like, oh, I was quite young. But yes, and I moved to study theater. I was pursuing acting. I actually had a couple of roles throughout high school in, theater plays and things like that. I took it quite seriously. Landed a couple of professional things, and then just decided that it wasn't for me anymore. I just wasn't clicking with it. It wasn't working with me. I wasn't vibing with it. When you're not vibing with something, wasn't working for me. So I moved into politics, which some might call a very random move, but growing up I loved to get into political debates, and I was always very interested in what was going on around the world, and I was listening to news from the age of 4. And if you don't believe me, you can literally ask my family. They'd find me with headphones, listening to the news and trying to find out what was going on. So yeah, it was kind of a random move, but at the same time it wasn't. So I moved and I did politics, and it was probably one of the best things I've ever done. It was such an interesting course. I may not currently work in politics, but I absolutely loved it. That's another reminder for people that you don't have to end up working in what you do at uni. Most people that I know, unless they did medicine or veterinary studies at university, have not ended up working in the thing that they did. So yeah, if you are also trying to find out what to do at uni and you're not quite sure, I'd say just go for whatever you think that you are currently liking or enjoying the most, because I definitely don't regret doing politics. I loved it. I had amazing experiences from it, and all the debates that we got and everything that I learned about, the UK government to international governments and how they work and how different it is. It was genuinely one of the best experiences of my life, so I highly recommend. Also, I know the video is more, we're going to be talking about red flags in the workplace, but if there is something that you want to do and you're not sure if that's what you want to do forever or if that's going to work out, just go for it, just try it. I think that's a really great advice, and I'm glad that I always had that mentality, so I want everyone else to have that mentality also. Yeah, so I did politics and it was just amazing. I went abroad for a year to Madrid. I studied abroad. I studied international politics in Madrid at a university called Universidad Pontificia de Comillas, and it was amazing. Living in Madrid was probably one of the best experiences I've ever had as well. So you never know where things can lead to, is something I'd say. You might try something, you don't know if it's going to work out or not. I definitely recommend whatever you want to do to just go for it, because life's too short. And yeah, I don't know if this was obvious from the beginning, but I do speak Portuguese because I was born in Brazil and I grew up in Portugal. So I speak Portuguese and English fluently, and from studying in Madrid, but also I took it into my own hands. I started taking Spanish classes before going there. I also do speak Spanish fluently. I don't have the best accent in Spanish. If there are any people out there who speak Spanish, they'll probably be able to know that or notice that my accent is not the best. I tried to adopt the Madrid accent when I was there, but I think it sounds more like an Italian person trying to speak Spanish. But yeah, I speak 3 languages, Spanish, Portuguese, and English, and I definitely wouldn't have learned Spanish had I not gone abroad. So again, just a reminder to do what you want. You never know where you're going to end up, and you never know the opportunities they're going to bring to you. And because I had that extra language, I also, during the pandemic, I was transitioning between roles, and I was trying to get a role, and I managed to get a role because I spoke Spanish fluently. So one of my, I'd say responsibilities, right? One of my responsibilities in my role was to translate things in Spanish. So I think that that's another really important lesson, that you never know where it's going to lead you, but you never know what life skills you'll also acquire that can help you out in the future. I did politics thinking, okay, I'll end up in politics. This is going to be really useful. And I mean, it was, but I didn't end up doing it. But it did lead me to Madrid, where I learned the language fluently. I learned Spanish, and that led me to being able to land a role in the pandemic when I was really struggling. I know a lot of people were really struggling. It was not a good time to be unemployed, with everything going on, especially because we were all stuck at home. But yeah, you just never know what's going to lead to you, and you never know what's going to happen and what's going to be useful. Today I want to speak to you guys because I'd say I have quite a few years under my belt of experience in building a career and jumping from one thing to another. I know there's a popular term out there on TikTok called squiggly careers, and it's catching fire a little bit. I know Newsweek did a feature on it. Definitely something that I've adopted. Not a lot of people do, but it's beginning to grow in a trend, and I think more like Gen Z and early millennials are doing it, so it's good to see. I'd always like to like have like new things, and I always say like, not out with the old, in with the new, but new emerging trends are usually a good thing. So yeah, it's great to see people are doing it more and just kind of using it to figure out what they want. So yeah, because I have a lot of experience in a career, or not all of it, but I have a certain amount of experience, I thought I could talk to you guys today about red flags in the workplace. And I'm gonna get out my little red flags in a moment. Yes, I have some really cute props, and I will show you each red flag that I named. I'd say usually red flags has become a term that is kind of like also caught on fire, like we're using it for everything. It's usually like relationships, but now it's like about boundaries and terms like that. So yeah, I wanted to also show you guys, or talk to you guys about red flags in the workplace, okay? Because I don't think this is a term that we talk about a lot in the workplace, or we will say like, if you look on LinkedIn and you scroll through, there'll be posts about people saying that, it's important to respect boundaries, or, it's important that your employer considers how you're feeling and things like that. But I haven't seen anyone actually like sit down, do a video. Maybe I haven't searched hard enough, but I believe I haven't seen it yet. And someone sit down or stand up and say, these are the red flags that you should look out for in a workplace. Because I think a lot of people, when you start your first job, you're not quite sure what's acceptable and what's not. I mean, you have an idea, right? But there's like ideas and like ideas. And I think that it's just one of those things where like, we're just not quite sure what is okay and what isn't. And, to each their own, people have different boundaries, people have different things that they want. But I think personally, there's just certain things that cannot be ignored for your mental health and for those around you as well. Because everyone wants to see you happy and smiley and thriving. And I think that there's just certain things that we need to touch upon. And I think there's certain things that people need to watch out for. And it shouldn't be accepted. And yeah, but like I said, when we start out, we're just bright and just really excited to get into a career and start working. Or some of us are sad to be leaving uni. I know I was definitely like a mix of both. But I was definitely excited to start earning money, like full time, instead of having to like do part-time jobs at uni. And I think that I certainly wasn't aware of what was acceptable and what wasn't. And I think that a lot of people aren't. When you're starting off, it's like when you're starting off anything, you're not quite sure how things work. You're not quite sure how people should treat you. You're not quite sure how people should address you, and like a myriad of other things. So I wanted to jump on and discuss what I think is acceptable and what I think isn't acceptable. And I think that these red flags, I've made them quite like, I'd say like specific, but at the same time, they're like, there's a theme to them. I just think that these are things that everyone should abide by. And I don't think that anyone shouldn't have that treatment. So yeah, I've done 5 different red flags, and I'm gonna get them for you now. I also want to make clear this video is for everyone. It's not just for people starting out in their careers. It's just usually that's when you're, I think, most vulnerable to certain behaviors. I know I was, and I think that also if you have stayed in a company for a very long time and you haven't worked somewhere else, and you just kind of like started working somewhere else, and you're not sure kind of like how those behaviors work and if that's correct, this is also for you. You might have been very lucky or blessed that the first role you had out of uni, or whenever you started working, was with like a really lovely environment, and you decided to stay for a while, and there was progression opportunities and things like that. Unfortunately, sometimes that's not the case. But if that is for you and you started working somewhere else, I also want you to, watch this and listen to this and think, is this all okay? Is this even better? Is this worse? So yeah, I'm just gonna get my red flags and I'll be right back. Flags! Yay. Okay, so I'm going to be talking you through each red flag, and I'm going to be writing it down as I am talking you guys through it, so that we can be really clear. I can hold it up on camera, you can see what I'm talking about, and I can then go into a little bit more detail about each one and why I think they're a red flag. You know, feel free to comment below in this video if you disagree or if you agree, and if you have experienced it before, I'd love to share experiences with everyone. And just know that if you have experienced it, you're not alone. I reckon a lot of people have, and I've actually discussed with friends who have also experienced these and who ended up leaving workplaces because of these, and I think that that's probably the best thing to do. If there's no other solution and nothing else can be solved, yeah, you gotta respect and keep your mental health first. So, first red flag that we are going to write on, I'm going to be writing on my desk, is competition, or pitting you against your colleagues, or like ruthless competition. I'm not talking about friendly competition or anything that's, I mean, most competition is really ruthless. I've in every positive workplace that I've worked in, there's never been any pitting me against any other colleague. There's never been, oh, well, they did this. And I don't think there ever should be, just to make that very clear. So I'm going to write that down. Ruthless competition, okay? I realize that that's probably the other way around for you, but oh well. Ruthless competition. That's our first red flag that we're going to wave up and we're going to say no to. So, getting into a little bit more detail about what I mean about ruthless competition. I just think that it's not anything that I've never worked somewhere that I've been like pitted against someone and I thought that it was friendly. Maybe there is such a thing as friendly competition, but I think personally, if any time your employer or your superior is saying, well, they've done this much and so you should really be doing this much, and you know, it's a difference between having targets for everyone and specifically pitting you against other people and saying that, you know, well, if you don't accomplish this by this date, that person might get the promotion, or that person is doing better than you, or that person is a better employee, etc., etc., etc. Any type of like pitting you against your colleagues is extremely unhealthy, and I think it does a lot of damage to like your sense of self-worth in the workplace, and it absolutely shouldn't, but it can really affect your confidence, and I don't want that to happen to anyone. So if you feel that this is happening to you, I think the first thing to do is politely and calmly address it in like a one-to-one. You should be having regular one-to-ones anyway, you know, once every 2 weeks or once a month at least, and just say, kind of calmly and politely sit down and explain that it makes you uncomfortable when you're compared to others, and make it clear that you are happy to accept constructive feedback. You know, constructive criticism is really important, but just explain as politely as you can that being pitted against someone else makes you uncomfortable, or just say that's what you feel is happening, and you know, ask them if they actually intend or mean to say something else, because it's not coming across that way. Now, I know these conversations can be really hard and really difficult and really uncomfortable, but personally, I just think they have to be done. If you are someone that doesn't mind pitted against each other, maybe you work in quite like a difficult environment or quite like a challenging environment, then that's fine. You know, this isn't for everyone. This red flag is like what I consider, you know, a red flag. That's what I consider a red flag. That's not what everybody else considers a red flag. That's fine. That's just what I consider it. And I know a lot of my friends consider it too. And a lot of people that I've worked with have said that that would be something that makes them uncomfortable. So if you do have a gut feeling that makes you uncomfortable and you don't like it, I would advise to have a polite conversation with your employer, your superior, to just say, hey, you know, this isn't kind of working for me. Can we maybe try it a different way? Say you love constructive criticism and you love to know how you can improve, but that's just not the way to get through to you. And you know, most employers want you to succeed because they're working for the bigger company and they want the company to succeed. So they would want to be able to tailor their constructive criticism to how you need it to be tailored to. That's what a good manager does. They want you to succeed, and they would, you know, as a manager myself, I can say that they would want to know what they can do to make you feel better, more comfortable, and how they can make it work for you. And if they don't want to do that, they're not a good manager. I said it, I'll say it again. They're not a good manager. Right, the second red flag that we are going to be discussing is, so it's a more personal one. It's less to do with your colleagues and, you know, being compared or like pitted against them. It's still not a great one though. And this is, I'm gonna call it bullying, or some people may call it joking or mean jokes. They'll excuse it as a joke, but that's not a joke. And again, you're gonna have to excuse my handwriting. This is not the best marker, but here we go. And yeah, my handwriting's terrible. But bullying, I'm gonna put that red flag up and wave it, and we're gonna say no to it. And now some people can say, they'll say it's a mean joke, or they'll say they're just joking around. They won't even say mean joke, because that's another thing that they will try to do. They'll try to play it down and play it off and say, oh, you're overreacting, or you just don't understand my sense of humor. Like, there are jokes and there are jokes. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I think if you're like super comfortable with someone and you are, you know, friends, and, you know, friends have different ways of joking. I have different ways of joking with my friends. I think something that's really important to remember, at work, it's a professional environment. So there should be no derogatory comments. There should be no rude comments. There should be nothing that makes you feel uncomfortable or is offensive. And I'm not talking about you and a colleague who are close friends and, you know, you have that intimacy with each other. I'm talking about an employer or someone who's superior to you making rude comments. And I think that obviously it depends on relationships, and different relationships have different ways of going about, and, you know, subtlety is everything. And I will say that I've had different relationships with my colleagues that other people would have, and with my managers that people would have, and, you know, but I think we're all rational beings. We can all kind of agree on what's acceptable and what's not. Nobody should be making any derogatory comments towards you. I had it made about, I believe it was just kind of the way that it was quite like a sexist comment. It was a joke about if I would, and my manager was a man at the time, and it would be, he was making a joke about me being a secretary or an assistant to him, and he made worse comments about how I should apply on Love Island as a certain profession. I won't repeat them because this is a professional video, but they were very disgusting. They were very, very derogatory comments. And that's what I will say. If you don't have a close relationship with your manager, okay, if you're just like, you know, he's just your manager or she's just your manager, if they are just your manager, and you don't have a close relationship with them, and they're making derogatory comments and you feel uncomfortable, that's enough. You don't need to say or play it off or disguise your feelings or say that you're sure they were just joking. If you feel uncomfortable with the joke, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be an extreme one. It doesn't have to be super derogatory like I experienced or other people have experienced worse. Whatever made you uncomfortable is not acceptable. And I think definitely bring it up with them, depending on the severity of the comment. Of course, if it's something super serious, HR. That's the first thing I'd say, is go to HR. If you have more of an intimate or a more of, intimate's not the word I'm looking for, like a close-ish relationship with your manager, okay? And you can feel comfortable enough to be like, oh, hey, that wasn't acceptable, or the comment wasn't that bad, but maybe they're trying to test their boundaries with you, they're not quite sure what it is. Just bring it up with them in conversation and say, hey, I know you didn't mean it this way. I would rather if we didn't talk about this or we didn't joke about this specific topic, because these jokes of this nature make me uncomfortable. I think that's the first thing I'd say. And that brings us on to our next red flag, which again is a personal one. Oh, that did not work. Boundaries. They come on the same, I say the same playing field or the same level as bullying, because I think that if you do have, oh, that's the link to it. I think that if you do have those conversations and you say, hey, I didn't appreciate that, I don't like it, or I feel uncomfortable, you know, we're using polite and friendly language and just explaining how it makes you feel, that isn't acceptable. They should then respect your boundaries, okay? They should respect, I can't keep it up at the same time, that's so annoying. They should respect your boundaries, and they should apologize or say, you know, that's not gonna happen again, and then it shouldn't ever happen again. Now, boundaries can come in many different shapes and forms and sizes. It can be, you know, your boundaries about if you're on holiday, you know, you don't want to be contacted, and that is actually illegal in some other countries where your boss is not allowed to contact you outside of the hours, working hours. It's actually a law that passed in Portugal recently, I will say that. Your boss is not allowed, or your superiors are allowed to contact you outside of the working hours. But, you know, boundaries come in many shapes and different forms and sizes, and what I'm saying is, whatever your boundaries are, if you have explained to them that that is your boundary and that cannot be crossed, then it shouldn't ever be crossed. You know, if you've explained to them that you don't like it when a certain thing is discussed, you don't appreciate when a certain thing is said, you don't like, there's just certain things that make you uncomfortable, and they still cross it, that's not respecting a boundary. Now, I'm not talking about, you know, like silly things like, well, I have a boundary not to come into work. You know what I mean? Like this video is very much on things, on issues, on hard, you know, people, when you go to work and you're hardworking and things aren't working for you the same way, that is something that needs to be, you know, needs to be addressed and discussed and looked into. And boundaries is a big one. Whatever your boundaries are, if you've made them clear and you've explained them to them and they're still not doing it, they're not respecting your boundaries. And I think, again, kind of the same with the bullying and the same with the ruthless competition. I'm just gonna wave my 3 red flags in the air. If they're not being respected, the first thing to do, I say, is have a conversation with them. Again, depending on the severity of it. If it's gone too far, if you feel like it's gone too far, that is literally what HR is there for. A lot of people are worried about going to HR. I've been worried about going to HR. I get it, it's a scary thought, and you know, as you know, a Portuguese and Brazilian person, things work in the UK very differently than they do in Portugal or Brazil in terms of like a professional career, in terms of professional business environment. They work very differently. So I totally understand. And you know, especially for people who aren't British or haven't grown up in the UK, I understand that going into HR seems like a very daunting prospect. Prospect? My accent is all over today. For me especially, it was very scary because I mean, where I'm from, and it shouldn't be like this, but it's getting a lot better actually. Portugal is, as I said, with the out of office hours being illegal to contact you, they're respecting boundaries more and more. But for a very long time, and especially in Brazil, well, a lot of companies wouldn't really have HR, or it wouldn't be something that was taken seriously. This is Brazil I'm talking about. It wouldn't be taken seriously. And it would have to be something really bad for them to want to do something about it. So going to just have conversations about your boundaries not being respected, or certain language that makes you uncomfortable, is something that would be preposterous to me. And I think that that's something that definitely worked in certain people's advantage, and probably works for certain people's advantages, because you know, there's certain things that we're not sure of. And again, that's why I'm making this video, because I want you to know what's acceptable and what's not. And yeah, I think that don't be afraid to go to HR. I wish someone had said that to me sooner. I wish someone had been like, or I'd seen a video of someone being like, HR is there to help you. That is literally the purpose of HR. If it doesn't work like that in the company, that is not your fault, and that is not how it should be. I want to make that extremely clear. HR is there to help you, and you should be very comfortable, and you should feel comfortable and safe going to them. And if you don't, that's a problem with the company, and the company is not as open-minded or as forward-thinking as they'd like to say, or as modern as they like to put themselves to be. And that's not your fault. That's not something that you should ever have to be concerned about. HR is literally meant to help you. And I've had lots of friends and lots of people that I've known who've gone to HR, and they've had really positive experiences. So I think that's the first thing to do. A lot of companies, you know, are very concerned, and more, they're more concerned with we seem to see that they're more concerned with, you know, their employees' well-being and their mental health. And I think that's a really positive thing in general. So I'd really want to just reiterate to not be afraid to go to HR. Okay, I know it's a scary prospect. I know it can be daunting, but don't be afraid to do it. Again, my writing is just really terrible, so I'm gonna apologize for that. But work-life balance. Again, boundaries, it does play into boundaries completely. But essentially, I think that the most important thing that we need to recognize is that annual leave, paid time off, you know, PDO, PTO, whatever you want to call it, it's there to be taken. If you have a specific number of days of annual leave, it's there to be taken. If you have a bank holiday, it's there, you know, for you to be taken, for you to relax, for you to enjoy it. It's otherwise we're going to suffer from burnout, and again, it's not great for our mental health. That's not what we want. But essentially, what I'm saying here is that we need to be careful with this one, because I think a lot of people, when they're going into a new role or they're just starting off their careers, are very eager to work as hard as they can, which is good. It's great. You should be really excited to start your job, but you should be really excited to get your teeth stuck in and working. But it's called a balance for a reason, okay? You won't be your best and you won't be as efficient as you can be if you're constantly working and you don't take any time off. I think that's something super important. And I think that I know of a lot of places who would encourage you not to take time off, or if you do take time off, would kind of be expecting you to be on call or be able to contact you, again, for industries that you don't need to be contacted. But even in journalism and breaking news, you know, people do shifts, people do rotations. You don't always need to be on call. That's just not true. That's not accurate. You know, you don't always need to be the person covering breaking news. There's multiple journalists and there's multiple people for a reason. So yeah, that's the biggest thing. I'd say time off is there to be taken. And if anyone, especially like a superior or a manager, a supervisor, makes you feel uncomfortable or tries to make you feel guilty for taking time off, that's a big red flag. Wave it up in the air. That's a terrible red flag. And that is definitely something that should be brought up in conversation. You know, there's ways and ways to go about it. You could ask, you could have a conversation in a one-to-one about time off. You could be like, oh, how come, you know, this is seen as am I okay to take time off, and see how they respond and be like, okay, sometimes I'm uncomfortable taking time off because I feel like the workload is quite high. I try to make sure that I can, things like that. So they should never make you feel guilty about that. Another big thing is if the workload is too high and you can't have a proper work-life balance. I've seen it, I've worked with it, I know it. I've seen people not take, or actually, I've seen people take their weekends to work because their workload is too high. Now, your workload should never be too high that you have to work weekends unless you're a CEO, okay? That's my personal, or like a founder of a company, because then that's your project and that's completely different. You have a completely different level of responsibility on your shoulders. But you also have benefits that come with those responsibilities. Someone who's in an entry-level job or in a mid position, like not a senior position, let's say like a mid role, let's say mid leadership role, you should not be working 4 weekends in a row. I mean, if you have to work one weekend, like I understand sometimes that happens. Different roles require different things, and I have seen people in entry-level positions working one weekend or things like that. Sometimes it's in your contract, sometimes you have to cover specific events, sometimes you have to be at specific events. But if you're working 4 or 5 weekends in a row, because I'm not saying to cover specific events, I'm saying because your workload is simply too, okay, I'm gonna put this really concretely, I've got it. If you have to work several weekends in a row because your workload is too high that you can't complete it in your 9 to 5, 9 to 5:30, 9 to 6, whatever it is, that should not be happening. That is completely incorrect, and that is your supervisor's fault, or not fault, but that's your supervisor's responsibility. That's their responsibility. Your workload should never be too high that you cannot complete it in your normal 9 to 5, 9 to 5:30 hours, whatever they may be. I get having to work the occasional weekend. I can totally understand that. But more than that, it's just not acceptable. It's not acceptable. And I think that everyone should know this. It's not something that should ever be done. And I think that, yeah, 4 or 5 weekends in a row, that's insanity. The weekends are there for you to relax. And if you don't take them, you're gonna burn out. And on that note, you should also take annual leave and PTO, as I was saying before. But yeah, that's also a specific one on if your workload is too high. And again, I think the best thing to do is to discuss this with your manager, discuss this with your supervisor first, have a sit down meeting, explain that it's affecting your mental health, that you're burnt out. And if that still doesn't do it, and if you had a meeting with them, say, what month are we on now? We're in March. Okay, so you had a meeting with them about this in January, and then 2 months later in March it's still happening, then go to HR. And again, HR is not a scary place to be. It should be warm, safe space environment where you get to go and discuss your problems. HR is there for you. So yeah, that would be my advice. Extreme micromanagement. Now, I'm not a fan of micromanaging people anyway, just because I believe that I'm someone who works best when I'm left to my own devices. I know other people, there are some that like to be kind of like guided through and like kind of like hold your hand a little bit, especially if you're new to a role. I understand that you want some more help. I completely understand that, and I think that's totally normal. I'm talking about extreme micromanaging. That's not, I'm gonna wave it in the air. It's not acceptable. It's not something, it's not acceptable if you're not comfortable with it. If someone's comfortable with it, okay. But I feel like a lot of people do, once they've started to get into the pace of things, into the swing of things, they do like to be left a little bit more to their own devices. And I think what the message sends out when you're extreme micromanaging someone, you're sending out the message that you don't trust them. And I think that it's really important to have a trustworthy relationship with your employers, because it's just, your relationship needs to be built on trust. You need to trust each other that you're doing the best thing possible together, that you're working together. And I think that when someone's extremely micromanaging you, like, asking you why you took a minute extra for lunch of your hour break, or, why you were 3 minutes late on a Wednesday, is just silly. And there's just no space or place for it, in my opinion anyway. I think that if someone's a hard worker, and if they've proven to you that they're a hard worker, there's no reason to micromanage them. I know, again, there's exceptions to this rule. You could have an employee that just, never turns up, or is always taking sick leave or whatever. There could just be someone that doesn't work hard. But for the most part, in general, most people are very hardworking, and they're usually very good at what they do. They wouldn't be doing it if they didn't like it normally, okay? So I think that's my biggest thing is, if someone's a hard worker, they're proving to you they're a hard worker, and you're still buckling down on them for every single little thing, and it's, why isn't this done? It was meant to be done today at 5 and it's 5:01. They might be sending you the email with the task at that exact moment. Or, why did you take 2 minutes extra at lunch? They might have had a phone call with a relative. There's certain things in life that just take precedence sometimes, and it doesn't mean that they're not a hard worker. It might just mean that, the bus was a little bit late. I think that's just the mentality to have. Like, life happens and we adjust around it. And if someone's a hard worker, they're going to get their work done. It might not be at 5, it might be like at 5:05, but they'll get it done, and you'll get it done to the best of their ability, to the best standard they can get it to, which will be a great one. So I think that's something also that's really important. And in general, I really can't stand being micromanaged, extremely micromanaged. All the jobs that I've succeeded in have been the ones where I've had the most kind of like independence. But I think that, yeah, there's something to be said that. However, I do want people to not get this confused. When I do say extreme micromanaging, I do mean literally questioning why you're a minute late. I am not talking about someone giving you feedback or constructive criticism, especially in new roles, because I find also that I need guidance when I'm starting a new role. I definitely need someone to explain to me how it works and help me out and, be there for me during the process. But there's a difference between that and questioning your every single move, or, asking, like, if you have a hybrid working day and everyone agrees to go in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you say, I'm going to come in on Wednesdays and Thursdays because I have a doctor's appointment on Tuesday at lunchtime, and they ask you to provide a doctor's, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, which I personally don't think is constructive to a working environment. And I think that the best thing to do in this scenario is to just kind of try and prove as much as you can how much of a hard worker you are. If you are being micromanaged, just try and prove as much as you can that you know what you're doing and you're trying your best. And I think that if they see that and they're still picking at every single thing like a chicken, then have a conversation with them. And again, all of these red flags that I've discussed, you know, work-life balance, what's this one? Ruthless competition, the bullying, the boundaries, and finally the one that we just spoken about, the extreme micromanaging. All of these can be, I think, should be tried and solved first with a conversation. I think, again, with the bullying, it just depends on how derogatory that comment was, because there are certain things that we should never accept in a workplace. And there's certain things that should, not even a workplace, there's some things that should never be said to anyone, full stop. They just shouldn't. And that's not acceptable. No one should talk to you that way. So I think those, straight to HR. But I think that all of these, you know, can usually be solved with a nice little sit down conversation with your supervisor and your manager, and just politely explain how you're feeling. I will say this, if you have gone down that route and you feel like you've had those conversations and your boundaries still aren't being listened to, and there's nothing you can do, then I say, yeah, definitely go to HR. And I think that if HR can't help you, then I would start looking at making your next career move. Because these days, I don't think anybody really questions on your CV if you only stay somewhere for a year, or if you only stay somewhere for like 6 months. And if they do question you, you can just explain that, you know, life circumstances changed. But I think that most people are very aware that you're trying to find yourself in your career, and you're trying to find what works for you, and whether that's because, you know, not the benefits, but the company's morals and values didn't work with you, or the environment didn't work for you, or the actual work didn't work for you. There's many reasons why people would make a jump and not stay somewhere for 3-4 years. You know, there's also the issue of progression and things like that. But I think that, yeah, I would just say never be scared to make a move, make a jump, you know, responsibly, of course, but never be scared to do something in terms of like prioritizing your mental well-being and your mental health first, because you have that for life. That's a relationship that you need to work on and look at for life. And a job, at the end of the day, even if you love it and you really enjoy it and like it's your career, it is still a job. And that's why I made these red flag presentations, because I want people to know what's acceptable and what isn't, because I don't want anyone to ever dread going into work, to be anxious about going into work, to be visibly upset about going into work. That's never something that should happen. And I think that, again, it's a little bit difficult whether you're just starting out your career, or you've worked in one place for a really long time, or, you know, you're not from the UK and you don't know how it works here and you don't know what's acceptable and what's not. I just want you to know, in my experience and in my colleagues and my friends' experience, what we are shared, like little pot of knowledge, what we know is okay, what we know isn't. And I want you to take that forward and apply it. And of course, you know, these are my red flags and these are a lot of people's red flags. Doesn't necessarily mean they're everyone's red flags. People work differently, things work differently for different people. We're all very different, and I fully understand and accept that. So if nothing of this resonates with you, that's fine. But if it does, then yes, please take my advice forward. Okay, that's it for me. Thanks, guys. I've been your presenter, Izzy, today, and comment below, you know, let me know what you thought. If you agree with the red flags, if you don't agree with them, if you ever had any experiences with these, you know, and how you got out of them, so other people can also see. Because my two main things currently are having conversations and talking to HR, but I know that that is not something for everyone. I know some people might be afraid of that, but if you see other people talking about it, not just me, you might be like, oh, okay, so I can do this too. So yeah, that's the biggest thing that I would recommend doing. But yeah, please comment so everyone can know, we can share, and we can all just have a nice little understanding that we're not alone, and that, you know, most people will have experienced this at some point. And it's just nice to know that we're all kind of like experiencing the same things, and that, yeah, we're not, I think the biggest thing is that we're not alone. But yeah, thanks so much for listening to me. Thanks for letting me go off my tangents and tell you a little bit about myself and where I'm from. So yeah, thank you and have a great week.